Hello. So good evening. So yeah, I'm going to give the talk why delivering on time is overrated. So I understand the title is kind of spicy, but I can promise you the talk will be a lot more reasonable, and hopefully by the end, most of you will agree with this statement. So just a quick introduction about me. So I've been building products for around 10 years in all kinds of roles, starting as a stakeholder, a marketing manager. I became a QA, a business analyst, a scrum master, and the last 5 years, I was a product owner. I've actually introduced Scrum at the fastest growing startup in the Netherlands and moved all of their teams to feature teams. I have also rebuilt 5 products with varying success, and I'm currently rebuilding a 6th product. For some reason, I always end up in a role where I need to rebuild the product, and I want to stress with varying success. Some products cost millions and didn't bring in a lot of money, and I've worked on products that actually doubled the growth, so the sales. So I've written around 135 articles on Scrum and product management. I'm also busy writing a book on sprint goals, and I'm currently the head of product at Rodeo. So I give talks and I write, but I'm still in the trenches. I'm not just giving presentations only. So most companies I join, and also most companies I talk to, because I get approached by a lot of startups and scale-ups, they care about 2 things. Is it delivered on time, so the timelines, and is it working exactly as we initially specified, so the requirements? And I'm going to challenge you a bit on this and say, are these 2 things really that important? Or in the words of Seth Godin, just because it's easy to measure, does it make it important? And I will start with an example from gaming. So this is actually, if you look at this screenshot, some of you it will trigger childhood memories, at least for me, if you played games. But this is actually a screenshot of the first game Valve worked on. And Valve was actually founded by 2 ex-Microsoft employees who had a lot of stock. So they sold their stock, they had money, and they decided, let's make games. They started working in 1996. They were ready to release in December of 1997. So you have to realize the press release was out. Everybody was waiting for it. It was their first game. And yeah, so they had the challenge as well that they were running out of money, right? They didn't have any games that were bringing in money. So they were faced with a difficult dilemma. What should we do? Should we release the game even though we believe it isn't fun? Or should we put it out there? And what do we do? And now it becomes quite interesting because Valve actually didn't decide to release the game not only once, not only twice, but they delayed it 3 times. And during these delays, they reworked all the levels in the games and all aspects of the game. It also produced the cable design process, which if you're interested, Google it. It's super fascinating and it's unique to Valve. And ultimately, they released this game in 1998, September of 1998. And that game was Half-Life. And those of you familiar with shooters will know this game. It was the best-selling shooter game of all time in 2008. So it actually is the reason why my parents were worried about me, because I was playing this game so much and all the modifications. My grades were dropping, and that's how fun and how good that game was. But what's interesting is Valve actually continued making games after that, and they are very famous in the gaming community. Like all of their games almost became a massive success. And what's very interesting is almost none of their games are on time. All of them are delayed. And they actually make fun of this in their Valve developer community by calling their development time Valve time. Like, we're never going to be on time. And then you might be thinking, yeah, that's Valve, that's a single example. Here's another example that some of you might know. So on the Nintendo 64, there was the game GoldenEye, and I still remember vividly when I was a kid, other kids in school talking about this game. And this was also a game which was delayed by half a year. And the most interesting aspect was that you could play multiplayer with your friends on your couch 4 at the same time on the TV. And that was actually added by the developers when the game was delayed and without management knowing. And when they found out, basically they had no option to remove it, and they had to continue with it, and it ultimately turned out as one of the best Nintendo 64 games ever made. And here's another example. So it's not in isolation. So Shigeru Miyamoto, like the mastermind between Mario, Star Fox, Donkey Kong, and I'm probably forgetting a gazillion more games. He actually also, a lot of his games were delayed, and he actually captured this perfectly with this quote: "A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad." And I just want to stress, I'm not making the statement it's good to delay things or to work on them indefinitely. That's not my point, right? So this is actually a childhood trauma. So Duke Nukem Forever was a game which has the world record, I believe, for the game which is the longest in development, 15 years. And when it was released, it was terrible. It was a horrible, horrible game. And it was very traumatizing for all the people who had to wait that long to play it. So let me continue with a gaming, not from example, not from gaming, how difficult it is to control timelines. So actually, this is an example from a payment company that's active in the Netherlands. So they had to increase their client number to 4 digits. So you have to realize they could only have 9,999 clients. And yeah, I imagine like early in this company, right, the developers were thinking, oh, 9,999 clients? Well, if we ever reach that problem, we will be filthy rich. So it's good enough for now. And then many, many years later, of course, they had to work for many months to increase this amount of digits. And they were not able to project manage this because it was a simple change, but it wasn't until it turned out it wasn't. So for example, they had a legacy database where they needed to migrate data. It was a nightmare to do, and they were unable to predict when it will be done. And yeah, so this is a very clear example of how difficult it can be to predict when you're done. So why are we not able to deliver on time? And I think that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, building softwares is complex work. We don't have enough information when we start. We lack the information to predict the timelines. And whenever we start and we make a prediction, it's based on what we can know at the time, which we know isn't enough. And that's also why any requirements we write down will never be perfect, because we're limited to what we can know before we start. So this is also how I phrase it, right? So if you do complex work, being book smart won't cut it. It's not about just a theory. You need to get your hands dirty, and you need to balance like thinking ahead and reacting based on what you discover. And this is essential. And as well, when you're working in a complex domain, then basically you see a picture of this coffee cup. So in countries like Turkey and probably also in Greece, they predict your future by reading the coffee grounds. And we all know that that's not possible. There's not enough information in the coffee to predict your future. And yeah, I have the same opinion with trying to deliver on time. If you're doing complex work, like trying to predict the future based on coffee grounds. So why is delivering on time overrated? Basically, delivering a feature still takes the same amount of time, regardless of what you estimate. It is our expectations that create this perception. And when you deliver on time based on initial prediction, that means you got lucky. It's kind of like you throw heads with a coin, and yeah, great, it was heads. So what should we be doing instead, of course, right? So here's an interesting example. If every day when we watch the TV or watch the news, there's this person presenting the weather, like the weather woman or the weatherman, and they are completely inaccurate when it comes to the weather when it's more than a week ahead. So it actually drops to around 50%. So every day this person is predicting the weather more than a week ahead of time, and they're still wrong, and we still listen to them. And it's because we know it's a forecast, right? We know that as the date comes nearer, they will have more information to have a better estimate. So it's really important when you work on any project, like provide a forecast, but be very clear that it can be updated. And that means that you have a timeline based on the latest and best information in your current understanding. And I still want to stress that still doesn't mean you'll be on time, though. I've been in situations where you were busy on the last 5% and you discovered a terrible problem that derailed everything. So if you think about it, right, what actually the fundamental problem is, so basically when you're working with any agile approach, it doesn't matter if it's Scrum, you're going through this cycle, right? You plan something, you do something, and then you check whether it produces the expected result, and then you adjust your actions and plans based on what we learn. And the problem is our plans will never be perfect. There will always be people that make mistakes or do stuff not exactly as planned. And even if we have a perfect plan and people do exactly as they're told, then still we will not exactly produce the expected result. And the only thing we can control is having short feedback loops and adjusting our actions and plans based on what we learn, so that we have more information, so we can correct these mistakes. And when we find out that we're not going down the right path, we can change our direction. So that's why I would like to say, like, agility, but also like having a product mindset. It's really important that you have this balance, right, of thinking ahead, but also reflecting on what you're doing. So basically, you need to act based on what you know right now, but you also need to be able to adjust your plans and action based on what you learn. And you basically need to work with what you do know, so that you can figure out what you don't know. And the biggest problem we have is we always think we know more than we do. And yeah, so most companies care about two things, but is it delivered on time? That's out of your control. Is it working exactly as you initially specified before starting the project? No. So are these things important? In my opinion, they're not. So what is important, right? Then becomes the question. So to go back to the example with Valve, you have to be kind of crazy, right? So to have a new company, not release the game, and not only delay a game once, twice, but thrice, right? So the reason they were able to do that is because they actually were very confident that their game would be good. This was because they had play testers, many play testers. They made a level where actually they could try out all the game mechanics, all the weapons. So they really had the feeling like we're onto something great. And that's why they were like, we're going down the right path. So we're going to continue down this path until it's really ready. And if you look at it another way, this is also kind of what comedians do, right? So if you would ask Ricky Gervais, right, if he has a show, he is not going to go plan a show 9 months from now and then show up there and give the show. No, they do tryouts, rehearsals. They make jokes, and some of them land and some of them don't. They adjust their jokes. They maybe adjust the pace. So they want to know which jokes work and which don't, and they want to have confidence their jokes are funny. And that's exactly what you should also be doing when you build a product. So what I would like to say is building features like doing stand-up comedy, right? Like if you deliver a feature, it doesn't mean you're delivering value. Just like telling a joke doesn't mean people will laugh. It's all about how customers receive your feature and if it helps them to meet their goals. And you really need to check that, just like a comedian checks whether he receives laughs back from the audience. And also, most things you build, you need to expect them to suck until you have evidence that you can hand over that it's otherwise. So this all sounds very nice, right? Yeah, probably you're nodding your head thinking, it's quite reasonable, but how do you do that? So it's very important that you start with the customer. So this is a very famous quote. People don't want a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole, by Professor Levitt. And actually, this is a lie, because people don't want a hole, right? They want the sense of accomplishment when they install a bookcase for their little kid, right? And their partner says, "Oh, it looks really nice," and they feel proud that they did that. I have that when I do construct IKEA cabinets, right? Or maybe it's the feeling of calmness, right? When you see all these books in the room of their kid, perfectly organized, and they feel like, yeah, all that clutter is gone. It makes them all warm and fuzzy inside. Could also be that they're just super happy when they see their little daughter or their little boy pick up one of the books and smile because he or she is now able to pick their own books. So it's not about the whole. It's not about the drill. It's actually about what it enables them to do. And that's why it's really important. You need to root your work in the customer. And this is one of my favorite quotes that encapsulate this kind of thinking. Upgrade your user, not your product. Don't build better cameras, build better photographers, right? It's not about the features in the camera or the lens, about does it help people make people to be better photographers. So it all starts with the problems, the pain points, the jobs to be done, desire, needs, like understanding your customer and talking to them and understanding how it will make their life better. And what's really important there is you need to have short feedback loops. So there's this famous build, measure, learn loop from the lean startup, but actually this loop creates the impression you need to start with building, and that's absolutely wrong. You literally can just have a meeting with your customer and just talk to them and understand, how do you do it at the moment? How do you do your work right now? And it's very important to not talk about features, because basically, if you ask people what they want, they will tell you, I need this feature or that feature, but that's a declared preference, right? But if they act a certain way or do certain things, then they're revealing their preferences. So actually, recently I'm reading the book from Teresa Torres, Discovery Habits. So there she gave the example that when she asked someone what's important when buying jeans, then this person said, yeah, fit. And then she asked, okay, could you walk me through the last time you bought jeans? And this person said, yeah, I bought them on Amazon and I looked at the reviews. And I tried to buy from a trustworthy seller. So that's when you ask people what they think, it's not actually how they truly are, and you need to keep that in mind. So this is a very nice analytics framework you can use to actually evaluate your product. So this is by Finn's Law. It's called the Game Analytics Framework, and it's actually purely a coincidence. I didn't pick it because it has the word game in it, even though I realize this whole talk contains many gaming examples. So basically, if you start by understanding what your users are trying to achieve, what are their goals, then you can actually track what they're doing in your product. So what actions are they doing? Then you can couple that to metrics, and then you can evaluate whether your product is helping your user meet their goals. So this is a super nice model, which you can very well use to understand whether customers are meeting their goals. But it starts with understanding what their goals are. So I understand this sounds all a little bit abstract. So here's a very concrete example. So this is actually a Dutch company, Picnic. So they actually allow you to deliver groceries to your house. So what's very interesting, if you look at their marketing, one of their main USPs or benefits are, we save you time. And they actually, so this really aligns with what the benefits they're trying to offer to users. And what's very interesting is what they actually did is they developed a recommendation engine, so that when you're shopping, you can actually it will recommend based on your past history what you should be buying next. And they actually measure the amount of time from the moment you open the app until you complete your shopping, how much time it takes. So e.g., they started with like 5 minutes, and then they implemented all these improvements to bring it down to 2.5 minutes. So this is a very good example of using this kind of thinking to help the users to meet their goals. So if you think about it, right? So this is from Melissa Perry's The Build Trap. So you help customers solve their problems, deliver value, and then exchange they're willing to pay. But this other part is also really important. You need to capture this value. So to get back to the gaming examples, right? So why was Duke Nukem 3D a success, right? So Duke Nukem 3D was actually being designed with last year's technology. So it was very interesting. So the Duke Nukem case provides a very compelling case study on how important it is to listen to your customers, because actually Duke Nukem knew that they were being designed they were working with last year's technology. So they didn't have all the flash and the glitter. So all the team did is focusing on making the game fun, right? So in many other games, especially back in those days, they were focusing on wrestling with all this new technology, making it look nice. And they realized we're not going to win. They knew Quake was out, so they knew they were not going to make it. So they just spent a lot of time making sure it was fun. And if you contrast this to Duke Nukem Forever, which actually was a massive failure, they really focused on the features. So the flash and the glitter. So every time a new game came out, they were like discussing, should we change our game? Should we add this feature? They actually switched game engines 3 times. So yeah, most games, people don't know the game engine. Nobody cares about the engine as long as the game is fun. So next time you build something, ask 2 questions to yourself, right? Is it good enough? And how do we know it's good enough? What evidence do we have? Because the better you are at answering these 2 questions, the better you can ultimately make your product. And also in case of Valve, right? If you have this confidence and this evidence, then you're willing to postpone even multiple times. And what's really important is, if you use the wrong roadmap mapping approach, right, then you are doomed to deliver features. So I actually call this the penguin principle. And why do I call it this? There's actually a very famous principle, the Peter principle, which is that people get promoted to the level of inadequacy. So imagine you have a job and you get promoted. At some point, you reach a level that because you get promoted, what makes you based on what makes you good in your current role. but that doesn't mean you're good enough for your next role. So at some point, you're too good for your previous role, but not good enough for your current role. And if you look at road mapping, the penguin principle is coined this way because penguins actually, what they do is they push a penguin in the water, and then if the water turns red, then they know there are sharks or killer whales there. And this is also something you can do with roadmaps. If you take a look at a roadmap, you can actually see what is the kind of thinking behind the company. So if you see a lot of features and big timelines, then you know it's a feature-based company with feature factory mindset. So it's really important that you strike this right balance. So this balance of acting based on what you know at this moment and flexibility in actions and results based on what you discover. And if you look at this roadmap, for example, you see that it's many months into the future. All the features have already been fleshed out. And that means you don't have this flexibility and you're probably not going to deliver value. And what's really important is if you make too much plans, then you're busy overfitting. So basically you're making decisions and plans based on noise, based on stuff you don't know. And if you make too little plans, which are actually often, I don't see this very often. Sometimes it's startups, right? They don't make enough plans. You're basically winging it and you're running as a chicken without your head. That's also not good. So it's about finding this right balance. But I can tell you, most companies are overfitting. They're making way too many plans based on information they don't have, assumptions that are wrong. And then you have big problems down the road. So I want to challenge you. So there are two challenges from me to you. So if you're working with Scrum or it doesn't matter with Kanban, set a clear goal, right? What are we trying to achieve? And let everything flow from there. So formulate this goal as what we're trying to achieve and why does it matter? And let the team figure out what to do. And as well, if you're in a retrospective or any kind of team meeting, instead of asking, why did our plan fail or why didn't go things exactly as we wanted, then ask, how flexible were we to respond to changes? Maybe what can we do better? Because we're always going to discover problems and we need to respond to what happens. So yeah, the most important takeaways. I believe you won't be able to deliver on time or deliver it exactly as expected when you're doing complex work. And what's really the most important is to gain confidence that what we're building is valuable, because everything else is secondary importance. The game analytics framework is a super nice way which can help make concrete so you can measure what the user is trying to achieve. And when you have a road mapping approach, carefully examine it, right? Because a road mapping approach with long horizons, with features that may prevent all of this discovery, learning, and experimentation, which is necessary when you're delivering value. And all these elaborate plans and listing all these tasks comes very natural to us, but it's not the right way to approach software development. And I challenge you, just start with a goal and an intent instead of with all these plans and worry about how your team is how flexible they are and how good they are at responding to changes. Thank you for listening. And I'm curious to hear what kind of questions you have.